G'day and welcome to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. Today we are counting down our top 10 season wreckers. Some very risky picks on the podcast today. Let's go!
Just done it from nowhere. Oh, kick the goal from inside the centre. Sheed from the boundary. Dusty. Petty. Petrarca. Oh, wow. How good is that? The legend becomes immortal.
G'day and welcome again to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Casey. You can find me on Twitter at Ball Boys Fantasy. I'm joined by Luke. How are you today, man?
Good, mate. I'm going good. That second take was ace, eh? I reckon
Yeah.
you killed it.
Went all out, nailed the first take, and then played the basketball intro. And we're not talking basketball today.
You didn't even notice it either, eh? We had to stop halfway through.
I was in the zone. I was ready to talk about our season wreckers today, which is obviously what we are talking about for the AFL fantasy side of things. So
yeah, we got a few players on. We're going to do kind of like a 10 down to 1 sort of
little countdown.
It's going to be nice. We've got a few players on there. We'll preface by saying we've kind of, the way we've gone about picking these potential season wreckers is that a lot of these guys that we're going to talk about are lowly owned, which means that you don't have that safety blanket to fall on of high ownership. Mm-hmm. But we've also tried to pick guys that are fantasy relevant as well. Mm-hmm. We're not going to come out with guys that are completely out of left field that nobody's even thinking about picking anyway.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be a very fun thing to talk about. So we're talking about guys who are relevant but lowly owned who could potentially maybe screw you.
And by no means are these there are some good players in here. There are some players that could potentially be really good picks. But on the flip side, they could be potentially season wreckers, hence the title of the episode here. So,
I mean, there's guys on this list that have spent time in our teams.
Absolutely, yeah. Some guys that might make my team even still. I would say that you probably don't want to pair up maybe more than two, maybe even more than one of these guys on your team. I probably reckon if you can have maybe one or two would be the maximum I would have with these guys. And we will. I'll say the way that I've at least constructed this list is that number 1 is the most risky, number 10 being the least risky, and we'll sort of explain our thoughts as to why they've landed in that order. So we'll get stuck straight into it. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right. So at number 10, we've got a premium defender making this list, a Zak Sinclair. So number 10, season wrecker, Zak Sinclair. The reason I have him
I feel bad calling him a season wrecker. I guess it's the theme we're going with today.
By no means is he a bad player or anything like that. No. But the reason that he has made this list is obviously there's a new coach in town, and also just the small sample size that we have of him being at the level that he is priced at the moment. So before last season, the highest he managed to get was a 79, and that was in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seasons of AFL footy. So he's had the rare 8-year breakout, and he's gone at 103. So at that price tag, look, he could very well come out and do the same sort of thing and be a great pick and be a top sort of 3, top 2 defender. But, there is every chance with the new coach, with the new game style, and with only one season of data suggesting that he is this premium defender type. There is a significant risk here that he goes back and becomes himself a bit of a bust pick at that price tag.
Yeah, that's it. And he showed so much last year. So, there's every chance that he goes on and he's easily a top 6 defender this year as well. But the thing is, like you say, once he's had that good season last year, the price point that he's at, you need him to be guaranteed scoring for you, don't you, in the back line. So you can't be paying up that much and then have that be a potential flop. And like you said, if you do pay that much and he goes back to those kind of lowly numbers that he did in his previous 7 years, then you're in a bit of a pickle, I would reckon.
Yeah, he's someone that he's number 10 on this list because I do think he'll still be around. I have him in my top 6 defenders, but there is that sort of little bit of doubt in the back of my mind, and it's just not someone that I've ever really considered picking for my team this year, just because of number 1, the price, number 2, the uncertainty of the coach, and number 3, just we haven't seen it for long stretches of time, like we have seen for some of those other guys at that top price. We've seen Doherty do it for a long time, multiple seasons. We haven't yet for a Sinclair. Different to a Dawson, perhaps, who's everything's the same this year, basically, for him. There's a little bit of question mark on his role, wing, half back, but same coach. The team's pretty much unchanged. So when I compare those two, I think I feel more confident in the Dawson. Sinclair, I'm just a little bit more worried. He's in 12% of sides, so not super unique.
No.
So some people are picking him. Again, the defensive line can be tough to sort of pin down. So I do think that there is some risk, however, starting with a Jack Sinclair, especially when you're priced at 103, second most expensive defender in the game. So
I agree with that take.
You want to be confident. Let's move on to number 9. Who do we have at number 9 here, Luke?
We've got Paddy Cripps at number 9, and he's another fella that I suppose has found his way onto this list as a bit of a victim of how well he did last year. So he's one of those guys, and I'm kind of repeating myself here, but at the price point that you're picking him at this year, you just want to be confident that he's just locked away, bang, done, in your top 8 midfielders, and you're cruising for the rest of the year. And there's quite a bit of midfield competition there at Carlton this year as well when everyone's fit. So I don't think, for any minute we're doubting that Cripps is not going to be in there being the bull that he's going to be. But, is there a scenario where he creeps forward a little bit this year and some of his midfield teammates are taking a few of those CBAs from him? It's just...
He's also got nowhere to go but down in terms of those CBAs. 83%.
Yep.
And, it's probably if you take out that injured affected game, it's more like that sort of mid to high 80s in terms of his CBAs. So he is by far one of the highest CBA attendees of the entire league, not just of Carlton. And, coming off a Brownlow year... safe to say he had a fantastic year, and in saying that, he still only scored and averaged 103 or 102.
Yeah.
You could say that injury-affected game, presents a little bit of value in his score, but when I look at his seasons average in the past, he's only had one season back in 2018 above the price that he's at right now. All of his other seasons, he has been lower than that because he is, again, kind of that player that's probably a better real-life footballer than a fantasy footballer because he's so inside, he's so damaging, he attracts a tag, he probably doesn't pop out for those marks as much as we would like. So for that reason, to me, he's just not someone on my radar, and I think that if you're expecting the 2022 Cripper, I think there's a fair room for disappointment there for me.
Yeah, at this time of the year, we're looking for guys that present upside, aren't we? And in the players that we're picking, not for their upside, let's say like a Dunkley or a Doherty to an extent, if you're picking one of those premiums, you want to be confident that guy is the big dog that he is. And for Cripps, like you said, I think the points all suggest that he could have a great season this year, but I just don't know how much upside there is. And at this time of year, we're looking for upside.
Yeah, and Doherty going into the midfield, there's just a few question marks, and like I said, I don't think there's anywhere but down for him to go in terms of those CBA numbers, and he's not going to be putting up fantasy points if he's maybe a bit more on the forward line and the forward 50. So Doherty is there. Sorry, not Doherty. Cripps is there at number 9. Before we go any further, reminder, guys, if you have any disagreements as well, of course, I'm sure there will be lots of people maybe disagree with our picks. Comment down below. Let us know your thoughts, and if you maybe are starting any of these guys, and maybe if you think that they're not quite the risky pick that we are suggesting. Number 8 might be a controversial one here. Probably one of the more popular. I think he might be the most popular player on this list. Darcy Cameron comes in at number 8 as a potential season wrecker. I guess for me here, there's a number of factors that bring into this one. Number 1, the interrupted preseason and his hamstring. What do they call it? A hamstring scare, I think was the words they used.
Wasn't awareness?
Awareness. I don't know. They never define these things. But I think it was a small strain. I think he is back at training. But then again, you've got the Big Coxie in there. We don't like big cocks unless they're the Oxlongs. And also the sub rule, I think, is also something that
talk to us about that.
Potentially might. Now, I don't necessarily think it's going to be a huge factor, but there's just that element there that people have talked about, the sub rule, especially with a team like Collingwood who play fast, play quick. If they are going into the game with 2 rucks, with a Mason Cox and a Darcy Cameron, there is the risk that maybe in the third quarter that they could sub out one of those ruckmen and play a bit more of that speed-heavy game, have those fresh legs if they see the advantage to be taken there. I think that 9 times out of 10, that's going to be Mason Cox getting subbed, personally.
Yep.
But there is just that 10% chance that it is a Darcy Cameron. You combine that with the fact that there's a lot of wording to say they liked those two combining together. And if it's like a 50-50 or a 60-40 split, that upside isn't quite there. The underdone preseason also doesn't help. And the fact that you're a ruckman who's mid-price, if it flops, it's very tough. It's a complete restructure to sort of get up to the top dogs or down to a value, and we don't have a lot of value options. So if this was a player in the midfield or the forward line where we've got lots of different options to pivot to at a similar price, he wouldn't probably make this list. But as a ruckman, it is a bit tougher for me to sort of feel super confident, and it could be one that does go south pretty quick.
Yeah, there's every chance that Darcy Cameron still starts in my team this season. But of all the points you just made,
for me too. Yeah.
Of all the points you just made, the one that actually makes me most nervous is the one that you talk about, the price point. I think that's a little bit underrated sometimes in people's minds. Is that if something does go wrong at that price point, have a think to yourself. You've got to generate, let's say, 200k to get to a primo, and sometimes there's nowhere to go down, or there's no comfortable options to go down to. So that can be really worrying, because then you can be chewing through a couple of trades at any point during the season when you want to be using those trades to upgrade. So I sort of see that as an underrated point that you made. Yeah,
it's 180,000 between he and a Tim English as it stands right now. So you're looking at sort of like, say something does go wrong in round 1 or 2. That's sort of the kind of price gap you're trying to make up in a position like that. So that is pretty much a restructure. It's like a premium in another line down to another mid-pricer to get that ruckman up. I also think that it's just tough in terms of, like, we haven't actually seen Darcy Cameron be a premium ruck for very long. Like, we've seen him do it for maybe 2/3 of a season. And even in that time, there were times he put up a 30 at the end of the season. He put up a 50 in there as well. So if he comes out and has a game like that early in the season, that's going to really halt his cash. He's going to be someone that a lot of people are trying to trade out. And it is a risky pick. Now, again, like you, he still has every chance to make my team. The R2 options are not
Slim
the best
pickings,
at the current time. So still definitely in consideration for me, but I'm not denying the fact that there is a lot of risk associated with it. And despite that, he is still owned in over 20% of teams out there at the moment. But just a little word of warning, I think, is potentially expect maybe a bumpy ride at that position, as we are all accustomed to in these last couple of years. Next one here, again, these next two, Darcy Cameron and these next two, are probably all very good picks in my opinion, or could potentially be big winners. I've got Zak Butters here at number 7. He's kind of maybe a guy you think more traditionally of as a season wrecker. He certainly might have been that for you last year with his disappointing middle part of the season. But like you were saying before the podcast, we have seen each year him improving on his average.
Yeah, he does.
And he does present a little bit of upside for us.
Yeah, he does sort of show progression in his numbers if you go back and have a look in recent years. The guy that we've been talking about in the same breath as Butters all preseason is Rosie. And the reason why Rosie's not going to be on this list and Butters is going to be on this list is because in terms of ownership, Rosie is far more highly owned.
You've got that insulation of people.
That's it. So if it goes bad with Butters, you're left out on an island by yourself, potentially. If it goes bad with Rosie, at least you're making those trades with a lot of the other coaches in the competition as well. So that's the thing with both Butters and Rosies. They can go good and they can just look like juicy forward prospects, can't they? But then they can stink it up. Like last year, I think Butters had scores 40, 50, 30,
34
30.
in there. Yep.
Like there's some proper stinkers in there, and if you, like Mitch said, if you cop a couple of those off the bat in the first couple of weeks, especially if you've picked a guy as a point of difference and he's lowly owned, that's a trade that you're making, that's points that you're not getting, that all of the other coaches in the competition are sitting pretty with their popular owned pick, or even if their popular owned pick's not doing well, at least they're in the same boat as everyone else. So that's kind of what put Zak Butters on this list. And in the same vein as a lot of these guys, he could be a season defining pick. So if you pick him and he's lowly owned and he comes out and he goes and averages 100 throughout the year, then you're every chance of winning a hat. But there's risk associated with it. Yeah,
and he's the kind of guy that even if he has the role and it looks good to start the season, and even like say it looks good, you trade into him. You would experience this last year. You trade into a guy like that, and things can go south quickly. Like he's prone to coming in there and getting knocks, and being banged up as the season goes along. He's
I was
famously like just a reckless tackling guy that doesn't quite have the bulk to sort of justify that. Yeah, he just kind of goes in hard, which you love as a teammate, but maybe just...
just woo up.
Yeah, just think about your health and the whole season maybe a little bit more. Yeah, come on, let's go.
But he surprised me. I was actually surprised when I saw that he played 20 games last year, but then when you really go and dig into it, there was sort of 2 or 3 games there where although he played those games...
hurt in it. You probably would have rather he didn't, hey?
Yeah, or you just, he was nursing something throughout a quarter,
there was
or he came off to get
game,
strapped.
I think. Yeah, there was a sick game. That was his 34. I remember he
flu game.
Was... Yeah,
MJ.
Yeah, not quite the MJ flu game. I think MJ had more points than he did in that game.
Yeah, nice.
But yeah, I think it's a tough one to read on. We haven't seen the role sustained for the whole season like a Rosie as well, which makes Rosie kind of that more popular for probably, but also a safer pick. We know he had a sustained sort of 16 rounds of being that 60% CBA guy, whereas Butters was a bit up and down.
Yeah, Butters finished the season well on a small sample, and he kind of started with a couple of good games, but he really stunk it up.
Yeah, but even at the end of the season, like his CBAs were still all over the shop. So last game, 44, game before that, 37, 31, 48, 22,
and he had a game
15,
with high CBAs,
0.
Where he scored poorly.
So there was a game where he's had 69% of CBAs, only scored a 74, so it doesn't always correlate exactly how you would think. I still think that he could potentially be a great pick, and like I said, could be on my team at the start of the season, but be aware of the associated risk. And like we sort of said on the top, maybe if you have and you're really keen on a Zak Butters, perhaps you also maybe don't want to have too many of these other guys on your team as well, because if one of them goes well but 2 of them flop, then it's a net negative.
Strife.
Bit of tough work.
Sure, you're going to want to talk about this next fella?
Who have we got here?
I'll let you do so. We've got Dylan Moore.
Dylan Moore, my love child.
Maybe you won't want to talk about why he's risky.
Well, look, I like
try
him.
And push people away from him.
No. Look, I like him, and I think I said our last episode that I'm cooling a bit on him just because of that risk.
What's his ownership?
His ownership, I think, is quite low, 4 or 5%. I'll have to double check that while I'm talking about him. But I think just the more I hear the wording come out of the Hawthorn, and I think I listened to a podcast the other day, 5%. I listened to a podcast the other day about the Hawthorn coach basically talking about they're just not settled on anything right now. They're basically just having open tryouts for that midfield. They
bloody want to get with it. We're not far off the start of the season.
So that kind of puts me in a little bit of hesitation. Look, I'm not ruling him out. I just think that when there are other maybe safer options in like a Connor Rosie, that I feel more confident in his role. The upside from Dylan Moore is not that much more than a Rosie that I'm willing to take on that risk, and maybe I might pick my battles elsewhere on my ground.
If you're going to take a risk on these guys that are lowly owned, you need to be confident in some part of it. You need to sell it to yourself, don't you? There needs to be some part of the narrative that going, no, this is why I know that this guy's going to break out or that this guy's going to perform well, especially when they're lowly owned. It's a risk.
And the other thing is, obviously, he's going to be in a bad team as well. So when you're in a bad team, and if you're that midfield forward split, you're relying on your team having a lot of the ball, or at least enough of the ball to find you enough and to be in and around it, at least to have a bit of possession. So it is tough when you're not the sort of that seagull half-back on a poor side to crack that 100 average, which we kind of want a Dylan Moore to get. And he is more expensive than a Zak Butters and a Connor Rosie. So that kind of, for me, is the difference between him being higher on our rankings list of season records than a Zak Butters, simply because he is basically 55 to 60,000 more expensive than a Butters, and I think that the poorer side as well is probably a bit of a flag for him. Maybe not the injury risk like a Butters, but a little bit more of that consistency of role risk for a player like Dylan Moore. So that's him at number 6.
Next on the list, I think we go down to Mitch Duncan, do we?
Yeah, Mitch Duncan, the most unique player on this list. 2%. Which, is fair enough. I don't think a lot of people are considering him. I think sometimes, I thought he might have been higher, but just because of the name of Mitch Duncan and the fact that he has been 110, 105 average guy. But I think a lot of people are being scared off by the fact of, he's in Geelong, he's over 30, they like to manage their over 30s guys and give him some rests from week to week. I also just don't think his upside's that high in the role that he's in.
Yeah.
I just don't think that there's much ceiling and a lot of potential for downside and rests and things like that.
I agree with you there, and even though we talk about the fact that defenders are tough to pick this year, you do kind of have a few options around that price range. So he's kind of around $8.20. If you go up a little bit, you get around like your Brayshaw guys, and then you drop down a little bit, and you can look at guys like Dacos and Young there as well, which I think just the narrative around them is...
You're definitely going there first.
Yeah, it's not only more upside, it's just probably more exciting, to be fair, as well.
Yeah, 100%.
So I'm probably going to want to tune in to watch Dacos.
You're probably not worried about them having a rest, 6 weeks in the season, those kind of things. He does have that enticing buy rounds, but again, I'm not thinking about that too much with my starting squad, so that's something that we'll cross.
Next year, I reckon we request the AFL that they give that buy round to maybe some fantasy relevant.
Yeah, give it to something else. Give it to the Bulldogs or something like that.
It's Geelong and Gold Coast.
Gold Coast, yeah, and with Touk Miller's injury, we're basically out of fantasy options for those teams. So, so I think Mitch Duncan again might have been higher on this list had he been a bit maybe more popular, but I think not a lot of people are considering him. So I think that as far as season records go, if you do have him, I'd probably strongly suggest reconsidering it. But I think that's a pretty obvious one there. Show me, we've got two players.
Yeah, it's a combo. I mean, these guys are just going to be talked about as a combo.
A bit of a package deal.
Yeah, I'm actually interested to get your thoughts on this one because I didn't sort of see these guys as high on this list as maybe you have here. So I'm really intrigued to sort of see what you have to say about Brodie Grundy and Max Gawn.
Yeah, Brodie Grundy and Max Gawn, it's just the unknown. It's the complete unknown of what these guys are going to do and how they're going to be going on a week-to-week basis. There is obviously upside, probably more so in a Brodie Grundy pick with his price tag, $830,000. I still haven't ruled him out as an option, as a guy that could potentially just beat up on those second-tier rucks, if they're going up against, guys in the forward line and doing some rucking in those kind of scenarios and completely just beat up on those boys. And maybe their ruck time is reduced, but their points per minute are higher. Gawn, we've heard about him maybe floating back and taking off some intercept marks and things like that. But to me, the risk is there just based on the volatility of their scoring week to week. And if you can't predict what a player is going to do week to week, that to me spells risk. And especially when they are not cheap, Max Gawn being the highest priced ruckman, he is owned in just under 6% of sides. So some people are still going there. I just think that it's a potential risk and a waste of cash early on when you don't really know what you're buying.
Yeah, I think you mentioned this on a previous podcast as well. It's because they're so spoilt for choice there in the ruck stocks at Melbourne. They could really just kind of play situational stuff week to week. If they're coming up against an opponent, they go, okay, well, I think Max is going to get the best of it at the centre bounces, and I think Grundy can get a mismatch up forward. Perhaps they come up against an opponent the following week, and they think, hey, we're going to get Grundy in there dominating the middle, and we want Gawn playing across half back. So us as fantasy coaches, we want consistency, like you said, and just the fact that they are so spoiled for choice means that they could be inconsistent week to week and really base what they're doing based on the team that they're playing. It would just be wild to even imagine a world or see a team where you have two ruckmen averaging 105 every week. Do you know what I mean? In the same team.
It's happened before. I think it has happened back with, was it Nick Nat and Cox, I think.
We're going a while back.
Back in the day, yeah. So that was a little while, obviously a long while ago, but obviously we've got two really good ruckmans.
We do. I mean, if we were ever going to see it, I mean, like if there was a year we were going to see it, it'd be this year. But I kind of buy into what you said there, just the inconsistency. If we see, so then let's think about it. If we see that they're kind of locked into a more consistent role where, let's say, for example, Grundy is kind of the dominant set of bounce ruckman and Gawn is kind of drifting half back, half forward, like that kind of thing, do you then start to see maybe Grundy as a more safe option if you kind of see that over a few weeks? Or
potentially. Look, I'd need to see some decent sample size and to see a rhyme and or reason as to what their scores are doing and against the matchups that they're choosing to do, the certain things that they're doing. And I don't know if we're going to get that within the first 2 to 3 weeks. The other thing that throws another wrinkle into this is just say one of them goes down and we're not sure of the timeline of when they're coming back, and you go, oh, great, this is a chance to jump on one of these guys. And
because if one of them goes down, the other one is
the other
one's one ruckman in the comp almost.
Skyrocket, it's going to be huge. So maybe you jump on them, maybe they come back sooner than you thought, and then you've got to trade them back out again. there's a lot of factors, so many ways that this could go, and I don't think that these guys, their relevance doesn't stop when the season starts and you've got your starting side. You're always going to be watching them, and
I'm
just
so excited to see what happens
and just to see what's going on. So they are potential season wreckers for the entire year, not just in your starting squad. So. It's just a whole lot of unknown and not something that I've sort of come across before in my brief time as a AFL fantasy coach. So
it's cool, but
we'll see how it all works out. We've got another ruckman at number 3 here, and I am firmly against picking this guy in your starting squad because I just don't see the upside. I don't see the appeal. I know some people are keen on him, but Lloyd Meek is number 3 on my top 10 potential season wreckers.
Yeah.
He's not higher because he is cheap.
He is cheap, but that price point presents a similar issue to what we talked about before. So he's around the 4, am I right? He's around the 400, maybe just above 400.
Yeah, like 450, I want to say. Let me just double check that. 473.
And I said this on our Rucks podcast, but let's say this happens. He's at 4, what'd you say?
473.
473. So he's at 473. He comes out and he starts averaging 45, 50 points a game. Yeah. What do you do?
Yeah,
you can't go down because
you're going to have to find a whole lot of cash to go somewhere.
Exactly. You don't have a rookie ruck option, and then the next...
You've got to get 200k to go to Lyset.
You've got to get just to go to Lyset.
300k to go to Cameron.
You've got to remortgage the house to get to English. So it's just... There's a scenario where that happens, and that's almost a season gone kind of thing. Yeah,
it's pretty tough.
You know what I mean?
And just the fact that there's 3 ruckmen over there, it's a rotating door. Like even if he has a great week 1, say you get tricked into, you trade into him, and next week, they bring in another ruckman and they play a different setup. The Hawthorn are not going to be afraid to experiment this season. Yeah. Like they clearly are not winning a flag, so. They're going to try some things, and it's just a recipe for disaster for me. 8% owned in AFL Fantasy. That's 8% too high, in my opinion. I just don't see the appeal. Look, I could eat my words, and maybe he's just that much better than the others. And
no, people are putting him in and then just going, how good is the rest of my team?
Yeah, the cash.
God, I'm a gun.
We've got so many good primos in midfield.
But you got Lloyd Meek at R2, mate.
Yeah, so I don't love the pick
Maybe
at all.
people are running Lloyd Meek at R1 and Samson Ryan at R2.
Oh, well, that's you're just giving up there. You just give us your cash and the rest of us will play seriously. All right, let's move on to number 2. You've had some visceral reactions to this player before.
Only when I found out that his 10 was an uninjured score.
Yeah, one of his 10s. Yeah,
poor James Worpel.
Worpedo, number 2 on our season records.
Yeah, we kind of beat up on him a little bit, haven't we?
Yeah, well, rightfully so. You can't go ahead and score a 10 on... and when you're getting CBAs as well, it's not like you're parked at full forward and the ball just hasn't come to you. Like, you're in the centre bounce. Like, you're around the ball.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's just... Yeah.
This is coming from a guy that I'm pretty sure I had a game where I had 1 possession for the whole game. So I can't be beaten up on the Worpedo. But
we weren't selecting you either, so...
for good reason. It's... The risk is there. He's tempting people in with those previously good seasons and the cheap price point, which I mean that's kind of a formula that you can go with. But there's definitely the potential for that to go awry very quickly.
And again, I don't think it finishes in round 1 as well. Like if he comes out, and he hits a 90 and he hits an 80, and people go, oh yeah, okay, he's cheap. I can make some cash here. Downgrade. Maybe I'll fix my Lloyd Meek and then go up. And then he drops a 10 on your head. Like, it's not someone that I have a lot of confidence.
Lloyd Meek will drop 100.
Yeah, and he's been a sub several times as well. Like, he's been subbed off and been the sub before. I just don't think the coach loves him a lot. I think there are other midfielders.
There's better options there in terms of Hawthorn's future.
That's right. I don't know if he's in their premiership winning side as a midfielder. So I think that he's not going to be prioritised. So I just see a lot of downside with him. And... look, the reason he's not number 1, again, is because of that price. He is cheap, so you're not investing a lot of money to start off with. So had he been maybe a few $100,000 more expensive, then he definitely would have been number 1. But because of that reason, at number 1, the number 1 season wrecker, our boy Aaron Hall.
Now, I'll tell you now, if you pick Aaron Hall and he plays... the whole season, pick the colour of your Hilux.
But
You could
also go pick up a lottery ticket as well, because you're running the gauntlet there.
This is all injury based, isn't it?
Yeah, all injury based,
but a little bit new coach.
Yeah,
talk about injuries first.
Well, so obviously he's already injured. he's already had a Achilles kind of soreness in the preseason.
No.
Never good for a 32-year-old who's had injuries a lot in the past. He was subbed out twice last season. One with a hamstring. I can't remember what the second one was, but
it's got to be a hamstring, doesn't it?
Something like that. But and also was dropped in the last round of the season as well. Yeah. And new coach Clarko, don't think he's putting up with a lot of that seagull action from Aaron Hall.
You've got half the North Melbourne list in your team at the moment, so I thought you
might. I can't fit another one in, can I? But yeah, so for that reason, he just presents a lot of risk. I don't think the upside is quite as high as we think about when we thought about his season a couple years ago, when they were really just chipping the ball around, just trying not to get smashed by 100 points. I think they're going to try and take the game on a little bit more this season.
Yeah.
And so the upside is not worth the immense risk, in my opinion. Yep. And again, you're investing still a fair bit of money into him. He's priced in sort of the mid-90s.
Yep.
You know, again, we've got other options, like you said, the Dacos and the Hayden Youngs and other guys around that price. If you go up a little bit more, you can get to those Angus Brayshaws and Dawsons. So for me, it's just an avoid.
Yeah, it's too risky. I mean, jokes aside, like Mitch said, this guy's a guy who's gone big before, but I think even if he does stay healthy this year, I just don't think the role's there and the game style's not there for what he does well in terms of fantasy scoring. So the reason he's number one on the list is because those big numbers from seasons gone by.
People might be tempted.
Exactly, can tempt people in, especially with some issues in
and especially if he does get on a bit of a roll like early in the season, you might be tempted to jump on him. But for me, he's the kind of guy that like last 2 or 3 weeks of the season, if you can get me through 2 or 3 weeks, then that's fine. But I don't want to rely on him trying to get me through to the end of the year because it's just a huge gamble.
He's the kind of like point of difference you could trade in a league final. To potentially go all in.
If you want to win your matchup, or if it's like you need to get into the top 100. Like I know I definitely thought about that last year. Lucky I didn't. But yeah, it's just not someone I want to have any longer than maybe a few weeks in my side.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But there'll definitely be people on this list that the guys out there disagree with. So, like we said at the start, please let us know if you disagree with any of these guys, or if you think that there's guys that we should be adding to our top 10 potential season wreckers, risky picks list. And we'll be looking forward to having a bit of debate on the comment section as well.
That'll do us for today, guys. Next podcast, we're going to go through and review the first round of preseason games. So got a couple of them at time of recording there tomorrow, but when this comes out, there will already be some games actually coming out whilst this is premiering. I don't know if there's going to be official stats, but I'm sure the people of Twitter will be getting their pen and paper out and counting on their fingers. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of information for us to sift through. So be sure to check that one out, guys. If you haven't already, make sure you are subscribed. If you want to send through a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, it'd be much appreciated. But until then, guys, give this video a big thumbs up, and we will see you guys next time. Laters.